It began like any other evening on set. The studio lights hummed overhead, the audience bustled with anticipation, and behind the cameras, producers counted down the seconds to showtime. Everything was in place for another episode of the Bryant Palmer Show, the nation's most watched late-night spectacle, known for its wit, controversy, and cutting-edge interviews. But tonight would not go as planned. Tonight, the man walking onto that stage wasn't just another CEO or celebrity ready to play along with Palmer's performance. It was Elon Musk, the world's most enigmatic billionaire, loved by some, loathed by others. A man who launched rockets into space, rewired the car industry, toyed with brain computer interfaces, and still found time to troll the world on X, formerly known as Twitter. But what no one knew, not the host, not the audience, not even the producers, was that Elon hadn't come to play by the usual rules. He had come prepared for war. The invitation had arrived like dozens before it. A simple subject line, a brief note. "We'd love to have Mr. Musk on the show." His PR team skimmed it, vetted it, and marked it as safe but aggressive. Palmer was known to poke, to provoke, to turn even the calmest guest into a soundbite for social media. Most celebrities danced around it. Some faltered. A few tried to fight back. Elon Musk, he didn't dance. When he finally said yes, no one thought much of it. Just another headline in a week of headlines. But that decision, one click, one confirmation, would trigger a moment that would spiral across the internet in a matter of hours, ignite debate in newsrooms worldwide, and leave a seasoned media professional stunned on his own stage. And it all started with a grin. Bryant Palmer was in his element. He was slick, polished, and perfectly aware of the cameras framing him from every angle. A suit tailored to perfection, cue cards stacked neatly in front of him, hair sprayed and styled just so. He had spent years cultivating this persona, part journalist, part comedian, part provocateur. The voice of the people, or so he claimed. He didn't just interview, he dismantled. And tonight, his sights were set on Elon. The crowd roared as the opening credits rolled. They were here for a show, and they would get one. But they didn't expect what came next. From behind the curtain, Musk appeared. He walked slowly, calmly, dressed in a simple black jacket and a gray t-shirt. No entourage, no flas. Just a man walking toward a chair. But if you looked closely, past the quiet demeanor, past the soft smile, you could sense it. A kind of stillness. Not the stillness of nervousness. No, this was the kind of calm you see right before a thunderstorm breaks the sky open. The two men shook hands. Firm, measured. "Glad you could make it," Palmer said, flashing his signature grin. "Likewise," Musk replied, voice even. The show began. Palmer wasted no time. "So, Elon," he said, leaning forward like a wolf circling prey, "people say you're either a genius or completely insane. Which one is it?" The crowd laughed. "Musk didn't. I think history will decide," he said, barely blinking. Palmer chuckled. The audience chuckled with him. But already, just barely, something had shifted in the room. The host was waiting for the twitch, the flinch, the reaction. He had built a career on it. But Musk didn't twitch. He didn't flinch. He watched. And behind that gaze, something was calculating. What Palmer, and the audience, didn't yet realize was that Musk had no interest in defending himself. He wasn't here to prove he was a good guy. He wasn't here to play into Palmer's rhythm. He wasn't going to be baited, belittled, or turned into a viral meme. He was here for something else. Palmer went on, probing deeper, sharpening his tone. "You fire people before Christmas," he said. "You live in a $50,000 house, but control satellites, AI, the internet. You play God with rockets and chips in monkey brains." Each line was crafted for impact. Palmer wasn't asking questions. He was writing headlines live. But Elon Musk, he was writing something else entirely. The beginning of a reversal. The camera panned slowly between the two men. The audience grew quieter with each exchange. What started as entertainment began to feel different. Then, in a single moment, barely louder than a whisper, Musk looked across the desk and said, "Do you want to have a real conversation, Bryant? Or are you just here to perform?" The room froze. No laughter, no cheers, just silence, as if the entire studio had inhaled at once and forgot how to exhale. It wasn't just what he said, It was how he said it. Calm, unshaken, controlled. For the first time in a long time, Bryant Palmer blinked. Not metaphorically, literally. His practiced smirk flickered. His confidence wavered. And the audience? They could feel it, like a tremor beneath their seats. The shift had begun, and the real story was just getting started. The silence didn't last long, but it lasted long enough. Long enough for the audience to realize they weren't watching a typical late-night interview. Long enough for the control Palmer always wielded so effortlessly to slip just slightly. He recovered fast. He always did. With a practiced grin, he leaned back in his chair and twirled his pen between his fingers. "Oh, I love a good conversation, Elon," he said. "But I also love the truth." He tapped his cue cards like a man preparing to deal his winning hand. "And the truth is," he continued, "people say you're erratic, that you make reckless decisions, that you've turned X, into a chaotic mess." Elon didn't blink. "That's funny," he said calmly. "It was losing billions before I took over. Now it's making a profit. Doesn't sound like chaos to me." A few quiet chuckles fluttered through the audience. But Palmer wasn't done. Not even close. He turned to the crowd. "Do we have any Tesla owners here tonight?" Several hands went up. Palmer smiled, almost triumphantly. "Nice. You folks trust this self-driving feature." This time, fewer hands. A few hesitant cheers. A few unsure glances. "Interesting," Palmer said, turning back to Musk. "Because some people don't. There have been crashes, lawsuits, people losing their lives. And yet you keep pushing it like it's the future." He narrowed his eyes. "Do you ever feel responsible when something goes wrong?" Musk's fingers tapped lightly against the desk. "You know, Bryant, we could look at any car company and find accidents. But no one's asking the Ford CEO if he feels personally responsible every time someone crashes a Mustang." Palmer smirked. "Fair. But Ford's not promising full self-driving." "You are." Musk responded with the faintest smile. "Not yet, and neither are we. That's why we're still in beta." Another jab dodged, cleanly, without anger, without ego. But Palmer wasn't looking for balance. He was looking for blood. He sighed theatrically and moved on. "All right," he said, shuffling his cards. "Let's talk Neuralink. Brain chips. What happens when hackers get in? Or when the government decides to, I don't know, turn people into remote-controlled robots?" A few nervous laughs from the audience. Musk gave a small shrug. "You watch too many movies, Bryant." Laughter again. Real this time. But Palmer's smile was thin now. Stretched. He tapped a new card, leaned in, and said, "You can't tell me you don't see the risks. You want to implant chips, automate every car on the road, control internet satellites. At what point do we stop calling it vision and start calling it what it really is, power?" For a moment, Musk didn't speak. Then he tilted his head slightly. "You think I'm trying to control people?" Palmer spread his hands. "I think when one man has influence over transportation, social media, space travel, artificial intelligence, and the human brain, it raises some questions." The audience murmured. Some nodded. Some weren't so sure. And Musk let the moment hang. Then, without raising his voice, he said, "I think people should ask questions. I think skepticism is healthy. But the idea that I'm sitting in some underground lair rubbing my hands together, that's a little ridiculous." Laughter again. Nervous. Tense. But it was there. Palmer chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Well," he said, "you did name one of your AI projects Ex Machina. That's a little ominous, don't you think?" Musk smiled faintly. "It's actually XI, but close." Palmer waved it off, his voice rising just slightly. Okay, but let's talk about something you can't joke away." He turned to the crowd again. "Raise your hand if you've heard about the lawsuit against Tesla for racial discrimination." A few hands. A few murmurs. Musk's jaw didn't tighten, but his eyes, they shifted. Palmer pounced. "There are reports, Elon. Slurs. Unsafe work environments. People being harassed in your factories. Right here on Earth. While you talk about taking humanity to Mars." The energy changed. The laughter stopped. And that's when Elon Musk leaned forward just slightly. "You're talking about an issue that affects every major company in America," he said quietly. "And when we found problems, we took action. Palmer scoffed. So it's just business as usual? I'm saying it's not unique to Tesla, and it's not something we ignore. Then Musk paused, looked Palmer in the eye, and delivered the line that would shift the entire tone of the night. But if you want to talk about lawsuits, let's talk about your network. The room stiffened. Palmer blinked. Excuse me. Musk's voice didn't change. It was steady, even, but it cut through the silence like a blade. You work for a network that's been sued for pushing false information, he said. You sit in that chair and call out corporate greed, but your show runs ads from pharmaceutical companies, defense contractors, billion-dollar banks. The audience stirred. This wasn't the game they were used to watching. Palmer forced a chuckle. Nice deflection, but I'm not the one. Musk cut in. You're not the one making billion-dollar deals behind closed doors. You're not the one taking orders from executives who decide what stories get airtime. You're not the one profiting off division. Silence. Even the lights felt colder. And then Elon leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and added, You want to talk about power, Bryant? Let's talk about yours. The air inside the studio had changed. No one said it out loud. No one had to. You could feel it. In the way the audience stopped shifting in their seats. In the way the laughter died down, replaced by something heavier, more electric. For the first time that evening, Bryant Palmer, the man who owned every room he walked into, wasn't steering the conversation anymore. And Elon Musk knew it. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't grandstand. But the way he looked at Palmer now, with calm clarity, with surgical focus, was louder than any outburst could have been. You want to talk about power? Musk said, Let's talk about yours. Palmer blinked. A flicker of hesitation. His mouth opened, but the words weren't there yet. Musk didn't wait. You sit in that chair, night after night, pretending to be the voice of the people, pretending to challenge power. But your paycheck? It comes from the same corporations you claim to criticize. Palmer let out a breathy laugh, thin, almost defensive. Now hold on. But Musk leaned in slightly, just enough to make it feel closer. More direct. You push just hard enough to stir outrage, just enough to get clicks, but never far enough to threaten the system that pays you. The audience was dead silent. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward. Something real was happening, and they knew it. Palmer fumbled with his cue cards, suddenly unsure which one to read. The smirk on his face, the one he wore like armor, was cracking. You talk about me owning platforms, Musk continued. About me silencing voices. But every show you do is filtered, approved, shaped by people backstage. He gestured broadly toward the set. You sit here calling out the powerful. But the second you say something they don't like, you're gone. You know that. We all do. Palmer swallowed. For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. His entire brand was built on control, on always having the next punch ready. But now, the audience was watching him, not as the confident host, but as a man suddenly unsure whether he was standing on solid ground. And Elon wasn't finished. You want to ask me if I feel responsible for the things I build? He said, voice still low and steady. Fine. Let me ask you something. He paused, just long enough for the room to hold its breath. Do you feel responsible for the things you say? Palmer didn't answer. You stir outrage. You provoke. You edit. You shape public opinion. When someone's reputation is destroyed because of a 5-minute clip you cut together, do you ever feel responsible for that? Palmer opened his mouth. Musk raised a hand. No, really. Think about it. When the lights turn off, when the ratings come in, when the ad revenue spikes, do you ever stop to ask if what you said actually helped anyone? The question hung in the air like a heavy fog. The audience wasn't clapping anymore. They weren't laughing. They were watching. Closely. Some exchanging glances. Some holding their breath. The illusion that had wrapped around this show, its host, and its shiny production value, was unraveling thread by thread. Palmer shifted in his seat, forced out a tight chuckle. Well, folks, he said, voice thinner now. I think we just got a masterclass in deflection. Musk smiled faintly, or maybe in honesty. A few claps, hesitant at first, then more joined, scattered, uncertain, but growing. Palmer glanced to the side of the stage. His producers were watching intently. He could see the tension in their faces, the calculation behind their eyes. And in that moment, he knew This wasn't going to be one of those viral clips where he looked sharp and fearless. This time, he was the headline. Still, he tried to recover. He adjusted his tie, smiled at the camera. "All right," he said with forced cheer. "You came here to talk about innovation, about the future. Let's end on a positive note, shall we?" He gestured broadly, his voice finding some of its usual rhythm. "What's next, Elon? What's the next big project that's going to save the world?" A weak pivot, the kind that might have worked 10 minutes ago, but Musk saw through it. The audience did too. Still, he nodded thoughtfully, as if giving the question real consideration. Then he said, "There are a lot of things in motion. Space travel, AI, sustainable energy." He paused. "But I think the biggest challenge isn't technology." Palmer tilted his head. "No." Musk's expression didn't change. "It's trust." That one word hit harder than anyone expected. "People don't trust institutions anymore," Musk continued. "They don't trust the media, or the government, or corporations. And most of the time, they have good reason." Murmurs rolled through the crowd. Palmer gave a tight laugh. "So what? You're saying I'm the problem now?" Musk shook his head. "I'm saying you're part of an industry that profits from keeping people divided, outraged, distracted." And then, the question that broke through every wall of the studio. "You ask if I feel responsible for the things I create. Do you?" Palmer didn't answer. Couldn't. Because for the first time in his career, he didn't have one. The applause was awkward. Not loud. Not triumphant. Just confused. A strange blend of clapping, murmuring, and quiet tension that couldn't quite decide what had just happened. When the show's theme music rolled again, it felt more like a formality than a finale. Bryant Palmer forced a smile. "Elon Musk, everybody," he said, voice tight, eyes flicking toward the camera. Musk stood, shook Palmer's hand, and walked off stage with the same calm, measured stride he'd arrived with. But the man leaving now wasn't the one who had walked in. Not in the eyes of the audience. Not in the eyes of the internet. And certainly not in the eyes of Bryant Palmer. The moment the red recording light flicked off, the usual post-show buzz didn't follow. No chatter. No rushed laughter. No rush of crew congratulating Palmer or getting ready for the next segment. The room felt still. Heavy. Like a theater after the curtain falls on a play that left everyone uncomfortable in their seats. Palmer ripped off his earpiece and tossed it on the desk. The grin remained, but now it looked like a mask he couldn't quite take off. "What the hell was that?" he muttered. No one answered. His producer, a man who usually had a joke or a headline suggestion ready within seconds, was staring down at his phone, scrolling. So was half the crew. It had started even before the show ended. A clip, someone from the audience, shaky phone footage, was already making the rounds on X. Musk's voice, quiet and controlled, played over a caption that read, "You make your living stirring outrage. You don't solve problems. You don't build anything. You just talk." By the time Musk reached the back hallway, his phone vibrated. He glanced down. Notifications pouring in. Mentions exploding. Retweets. Shares. Comments. Some called it a takedown. Some called it performance art. Some called it a reckoning. But whatever they called it, they weren't talking about Palmer's questions anymore. They were talking about Musk's answers. Palmer stormed into his dressing room and slammed the door behind him. He dodged every question, he snapped. His producer followed behind, speaking carefully. "Did he, though?" Palmer spun around. "You're kidding, right?" The producer hesitated. "Bryant, people don't like feeling manipulated. And tonight, you didn't look like a truth seeker. You looked like a trap setter." Palmer poured himself a drink with shaky hands. The guy literally spun every issue into some grand conspiracy against himself. "That's not accountability." "No," the producer said slowly. But it was effective. Outside the dressing room, social media was on fire. Hashtags were trending. Memes were circulating. Think pieces were already being drafted. And then came the knock on the door. An assistant peeked in, voice nervous. "Bryant, the network wants a meeting. Now." Palmer didn't reply. Just downed his drink, grabbed his blazer, and headed toward the storm. Meanwhile, Musk sat alone in a quiet office, the city lights of Los Angeles flickering in the distance behind him. He wasn't watching the news. He didn't need to. He had already seen what he came to see. A moment. Just one moment where the camera stopped being a weapon and became a mirror, where the audience, so used to the spectacle, saw something beneath the surface. Not a billionaire, not a genius, not even a victim, just a man calling out the script for what it was. His phone buzzed again. A simple post caught his attention. It wasn't from a journalist. It wasn't from a pundit. It was just a random viewer. The kind of person no one ever quotes on TV. But tonight, their words cut through the noise. The scariest part about that interview wasn't what Elon said. It was realizing how badly the media wants to control the story. Musk smiled, just slightly. He knew it wouldn't last. The media machine would recover. The narrative would be spun. Palmer's team would frame it as Musk being evasive, arrogant, paranoid. That part was inevitable. But the crack had been made. And once people see the strings, they don't watch the puppet show the same way again. The next morning, the interview had gone from a segment to a cultural moment. News outlets scrambled to respond. One called Musk's performance a masterclass in composure. Another accused him of flipping the script to avoid hard questions. A third asked, has Elon Musk just exposed how interviews are rigged for spectacle, not substance? But beyond the headlines, something else was happening. People were thinking, questioning, not just Musk, not just Palmer, but the system itself. Why did media personalities seem more like performers than truth seekers? Why did interviews feel scripted, designed for drama, not dialogue? Why did criticism always seem to come from the same safe angles, never the uncomfortable ones? At the network boardroom, the conversation was tense. Palmer sat across from executives, arms crossed, defensive. The numbers are through the roof, one of them admitted. Highest engagement we've had all year. Palmer smirked. You're welcome. But another voice spoke up. Softer, more serious. Yes, but it's not going our way. Palmer rolled his eyes. It's just a news cycle. It'll pass. A pause. Maybe, someone else said. Or maybe this time it won't. And that's when it hit him. This wasn't about one bad night, one interview gone wrong. This was about trust. And maybe, just maybe, the audience had started asking questions they weren't supposed to. In a world where everything is curated, where outrage is profitable, and the line between news and narrative blurs more every day. Sometimes, all it takes is one quiet question to remind us what honesty actually sounds like.